Hello everyone, and welcome back to another session of Megan Grace DIY. Today's project, I took an old tapestry that I had laying around that I really liked the colors and turned them into a pair of Genie pants. Before we get started, let's list the supplies you're going to need. You'll need a pair of pajama pants that you like how they fit, a tapestry, 1/4 yard of a soft spandex that you'd like for the waistband, and then pins, thread, and scissors. All of today's supplies are linked in the description below, except for my 20-year-old pajama pants. I don't really think you'd want a pair of those. So when you're using a tapestry as your fabric, you really want to take into account where the pattern's going to fall on the leg of the pant. So that's why I take the pants and kind of lay them down on top of the mandala, because I know I want the mandala to be in the front of the pants. You can't just kind of go cutting haphazardly, because then it's going to look really weird for your final product. To use a pair of pants that you already own as a pattern, all you have to do is fold them in half along the crotch line, and you're going to reveal this kind of ski slope shape at the top. That's where you fit against the front of the body and the back of the body. I want you to take your tapestry and fold it in half down the center of the mandala. Next, you're going to take your pants and lay them down on top of the fabric about 2 inches away from that fold line. You want that crotch ski slope to be facing the fold line, not away from the fold line. So if you take a look at the pants that I'm using here, they're kind of tapered at the ankle, and the pants that we want to make, the Genie pant style, are a bit fuller at the ankle. So I'm going to start by cutting up that inside seam of the leg. But when I start to cut, I'm actually going to cut a wider ankle and cut almost straight instead of cutting at that angle that the pants have right now. Now go ahead and cut up the ski slope, but give yourself about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch extra as your seam allowance. Next, you can cut straight along the bottom, and I'm giving myself a little bit extra here beyond the pants because I want them to be a bit blousier, but if you want them straighter, then cut right along where the hem of your pants are. Something I want to mention about the top of the pants is the front is going to hit a little bit lower than the back. And if you think about it, it's because your back has a butt there. So the bigger your butt, the higher the back needs to be, and the more fabric that needs to be there to accommodate it. So you're going to cut the front slightly lower than we end up cutting that ski slope in the back. Once you've got the front cut, go ahead and flip your pants over along the side seam. You're going to go ahead and move them a little bit to the right to give the leg a bit more volume. Hopefully you can kind of picture now where that mandala is going to lay along the front of the pants and wrapping around towards the back. Now you're going to continue cutting the hemline all the way out to the edge of the back seam of the pants. Again, I want you to take note here how that back inside seam of the pant is kind of tapered. I want them to be nice and full, so I'm cutting about 3 inches past that back inside seam before I start cutting straight up the middle to get to my back ski slope. Once you're at that back ski slope, go ahead and cut right up it, leaving about 1/2 inch as your seam allowance. As you go ahead and cut across the top of the pants, just remember what we talked about before, that the back ski slope is going to be significantly taller or longer than the front, and that's to cover your booty. Take the 2 pieces of fabric and flip them so the outside fabric is touching the other outside fabric. Then take your pins and put pins about every 2 inches along the ski slope. You're going to do this in the back as well. This is to prepare you to sew those 2 seams on the sewing machine. Next, use your sewing machine to sew each of the ski slopes separately with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I sew with a straight stitch at the stitch length set to 3. After you've finished sewing each seam, make sure you press it open with your iron set to the cotton setting. Next, you're going to place a zigzag next to the seam to keep your fabric from fraying. Now I want you to find the bottom of the ski slopes for the front and the back. What you're going to do is bring those 2 points together. After lifting up the top layer of fabric, take the 2 crotch points and meet them in the middle. Take a pin to lock them in place. By matching up these two new ends, you're creating the inseam of each pant leg. Take your pins and place them about every 2 to 3 inches to prepare to sew the inseam of your pants. Where I'm pointing right now are the inseams of each pant leg. You're going to take that over to your sewing machine and sew each inseam at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Remember to press when you're done. And then you're going to go back and add a zigzag stitch besides that straight seam. This will make sure that your seam doesn't fray. Next, we will apply a gathering stitch in the waist and in the ankle of each pant leg. A gathering stitch is a straight stitch sewn at the longest stitch length, which for me would be a 5. You sew that into the top and to the ankles, and then you're going to pull it to create some gathers in the fabric. When completing a gathering stitch, it's important to remember that you need to leave your strings at the start and the stop and don't backstitch. Now you need some measurements. Take the bottom of your ankle and measure all the way around. Remember that measurement. Mine was about 9.5. Then do the same to your waist. You're going to take your spandex and cut one piece that's the length of your waist and then another 2 pieces that are the length of your ankle. Both of these should be about 4 to 6 inches wide. With your cut waistband, go ahead and fold it in half and pin together your unsewn edge. It should look like a little tube. Then you're going to do the same thing with the pieces that you cut for your ankles. Fold them in half. They should be taller rather than wider, and you're going to pin the edges in place. Then you're going to take them to the sewing machine and sew a straight stitch at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now that all 3 pieces of spandex are sewn, take the waistband and you're going to fold it in half widthwise, starting with the seam. Make sure your seam is open before you fold so it doesn't get bulky. Work your way around the entire waistband, folding it in half and pinning it in place, making sure that it's even. Before we can match up the waistband with the pants, we need to make a few snips in the fabric to mark where we're going to match it up. Those snips should be at the quarter way points. So what I did was, with it folded in half, I cut a snip at each end and then cut a snip directly on top of wherever the back seam is. Before we need to gather at the waistband and at the ankles, I want to show you up close what it looks like to pull your gathering stitches. You can have 1 or 2 gathering stitches in place, but you take your 2 bobbin threads and you pull them very gently and the fabric will pucker. Sewing 2 gathering stitches versus 1 just gives you a little bit more control over pulling your gathers in tightly. So I took the back seam of the waistband and I lined it up with the back seam of the pants and then matched those little snips up with the quarter points of the pants. The pants should be slightly bigger than the waistband, but not by much. So what you're going to do is take those gathering stitches and just gently scrunch the pants to fit the waistband. Remember, it's important to be gentle because if not, you might snap those gathering stitches and then you'll have to go back and do them again. You want to work the gathering stitches around the waistband so that way they're as even as possible. Also, when you're pinning the waistband to the edge of the pants, they should both be raw edges. If you're finding that you're pinning the folded edge of the waistband to the raw edge of the pants, then the waistband is upside down. If you need to, you can do 2 separate gathering stitches on each different side of the pants. That way it's a little bit easier to pull. When you're ready to start pulling, you grab the string that's facing you and pull gently along the ankle of the pant. These are going to need to be scrunched up quite a bit more. I've got the width of the cuff on top for a guide, but you're going to keep scrunching all the way around the ankle. I want you to take the cuff for the ankle and slip it onto your hand. We fold it in half just like we did with the waistband a few steps ago. Then you're going to pull the pant through the cuff. Remember that folded part is facing away from you, and you're pinning the rough edge of the pant to the rough edge of the actual cuff. This can take a little bit of finesse, but you're gonna make sure all those nice little scrunchies are even around the ankle of the pant and they're pinned in place. You don't wanna have any areas of big, like bunched up fabric. Once everything is pinned in place, you're gonna start by sewing the waistband onto the pants. If you find that the scrunchies and the gathers are getting kind of caught under the machine foot, take your hands and pull it taut widthwise. This will help them stay in place and go underneath the foot better. When you're ready to move on to the ankle, remember that you're going to need to go slow. It's a very small circle and you won't be able to sew it all with one fluid movement. So as you can see, I like to sew from the inside of the ankle or the waistband. It helps me catch any of these little giant puckers that I may have missed, like this one right here, and kind of smooth it out before I sew it into place. Because if not, I'll have to go back and take it out with a seam ripper and sew it again. The reason you want to look out for these big giant chunks of fabric that accidentally get sewn in place while you're doing gathers is from the outside, it'll look like a pleat, and that's not really the look that you're going for. So if when you flip it inside out and you see a really big giant dip in the fabric or fold in the fabric, that means that you had a pucker somewhere that you need to go back with your seam ripper and undo it and gather in properly. Once both your ankles and your waistband are completed, you can go ahead and add in a zigzag stitch again to the right of your seam. Once you're done, you can go ahead and cut off any excess fabric to the right of the zigzag, but make sure you don't accidentally cut through the zigzag stitch. Now your seams will be nice and finished and won't risk fraying in the wash. Once all of your seams are trimmed, you can go ahead and flip your garment right side out. I think this is the best part, to be proud of all the hard work you've done. And congratulations, your pants are all finished. So go ahead, put them on, start your stuff around the neighborhood, and enjoy your new project. Thank you so much for joining me for today's tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the description below, along with any requests for specific tutorials. If you'd like to get notifications for the next time I post a video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe and the little bell button. I hope to see you soon. Bye!